genius solution to everybody points at their own little database and their own little file, so nobody's trying to access the same thing at the same time. You all have your own thing. We tested it on a couple and it seemed okay. So, where we left off right before we went to lunch is this whole idea of trying to figure out which tables to go to, which fields do I need. There are some tips on page 224. The very first tip is know your database. Well, guess what? Not everybody knows their database. It just comes with time. And the more you work with it, the more it's going to seem familiar. Okay. And in our mock-up, we've got our display fields. What is it that we want you to display in our report? But now you need to go in and find what those fields are in your database. For those filters, for those display fields, you have to start going through and tying what you're going to see to your database. This is all just kind of your mock-up and your process of the pre-development. Now, about halfway down, there's a section called Selecting Multiple Tables. And it says sometimes you will find one table that contains fields for all the desired display fields and filter fields in your report. Like I said, if you find that, do a little happy dance because your report's going to take you about 5 minutes to do. Chances are it's not going to be that easy. Okay? Most of the time you are going to have to go to multiple tables. And we saw that with our examples, right? We started going along and then we said, well, in order to get this field, I have to go to a different table. In order to get that field, I have to link it to this, and you determine how it's connected. What fields, oftentimes you're pulling one field from multiple tables, once as the actual field, once as a filter. We'll see that. Okay. The thing we're really after is that unique identifier, and that's what this is saying. Often the related field that links those tables together is that unique ID. Customer number, salesperson code, vendor number, GL account number. Right? These are all things that uniquely identify entities within our database. And so we would never really want to link, say, our customer ledger entry table and our customer table based off their name. What if we have two customers with the same name, they just happen to be in different states? Or if we're building our commission report, we've got two salespeople with the same name. We've got two Tom Joneses. Next up, it's not unusual. So you might have this issue where you want to find that unique identifier, right? That code, that number, something that uniquely identifies them. There are times when you weren't going to display that unique ID in your report. We're going to need it in there, but we have ways of getting around that. And then in order to find the right table, you have to determine what it is that you're trying to do. Once we start going into our dynamic lists and talking about a summary list versus the data, that's where this whole concept of which table do I really need to go to get this value. But I showed you that we could use our Jet browser to find information, or we can go into Nav and use Zoom or Table or the control function Alt F1 to pull up about this page, and I'll tell you which table it is, what descriptor, what fields that it's using. But if you really can't find it, go talk to somebody in your IT department. It's funny, I get that every time I say this. Everybody's like, uh-huh. Go talk to your database manager. Someone who is involved in your implementation or the conversion.
Not even.
Ask yourself.
Yes.
Ask yourself. Or Paul.
No.
Or your Nav reseller. Sometimes you can just ping them with a question and say, hey, I really can't figure this out. I've had clients do that where I'm trying to build a report for them, and they're like, I can't figure out how these two tables are linked together. I know they're linked together some way, there's a clear logic, but it took the combination of like 3 or 4 fields in order to get that combination. And I just couldn't figure it out. I threw my hands up and said, go talk to your Nav reseller, because I have no idea. And they came back 5 minutes later, and they're like, clearly it's this, this, and this, and this. I'm like, of course, right? So you're not in this alone. Hopefully you have people that can help you. For me, the biggest thing is go and find it in Nav. If you know where to find it in Nav, you should be able to get that information. It's not always the case, but to me, that's my first
In
stop.
IT defense, they are more like systems, not
Right.
data management.
Sometimes they know, sometimes they don't. Just depends on their background. I know our IT guy knows it pretty well, but then again, we are Jet report, so hopefully he knows it pretty well. So it just depends. We talked about organizing our table and fields. We can put it on the mock-up. We can just write on there like, hey, this field is this table and that field. I can create a list or I can create a table. We did it the table method. Here's my display field.
What?
What happened?
My computer just crashed.
What you did for blue screen?
Ooh.
Call your IT.
I had nothing to do with that. Let's shut it down and reboot that bad boy.
It is, it's rebooted.
Oh, okay.
No bueno.
The good news is we're almost to the point where I need you to have that computer up and running. Okay. So, right before lunch, we actually did some examples. Bless you. And we determined which tables, which fields we needed for both Katie's marketing report and Janice's commission report. We kind of saw the process of trying to figure out what it was we needed from this table and that table. The last thing we need to do is build our report out. Right? Get it ready to start putting in our JET functions. And that's what setting up our options page, setting up the report page. The final two pieces of our pre-development. This is on page 233. Okay. Setting up our options page, and I'll wait till you're up and running because we are going to do stuff in Excel on this, and I'll have you guys follow along.
I need those.
Yeah, go ahead and open Excel.
Oh,
Did yours crash too, or?
no, it doesn't have the jet thing.
Create a new worksheet within that workbook.
I'm gonna reopen
Oh.
it. Now it's
Yeah.
there.
If your JET ribbon ever disappears, the easiest way to get it to come back, either click on another worksheet within the workbook or create a new one and then go back and it magically appears for whatever reason. It's just the way Microsoft and the plugin, sometimes they just describe that with my Power Pivot. From time to time will just disappear.
You want Power Pivot?
No. We're doing a whole series of webinars and stuff on Power BI, the new tool that they've been kind of touting, which is kind of a combination of all those things. I mean, it's got some nice tools, but you definitely have to have a back end that can handle it. If you don't have that, it's pain. So, all right.
Is it okay if we don't have all that stuff?
That is totally fine, because this is just my mock-up. Normally I'd have this on a piece of paper. I happen to have it here. So what are we going to put on our options page? We're going to put all of our options, our report options, and our hard-coded filters. And I typically always have a report options page. Like I said, it's very rare that I ever have a report that doesn't have at least the date option, right? It's very rare that that happens. So more than I can't think of a single time, more often than not. I can only think of one time I've actually had one that they didn't need a report option, and it was just recently because they wanted to recreate basically mailing labels of their customers. And it was literally, here's their customer name, here's their address, here's their city, state, contact number, all this stuff, and it was, okay, well, we don't really need any options for this. It was one of those very few instances. So here's what I do when I start getting ready for my report. I open up a brand new workbook. I name sheet number 1, option. You can name it whatever you want. Option, options, parameters, choices, banana pancakes. And I create a second sheet and I say this is going to be my report. So I've got an option page, I've got a report page. Once I have these two things, I'm going to go up to the JET ribbon, I'm going to run my report, and I'm going to go back into design. Why in the world do I do that? I have nothing to report, but what we can see, what it does is it adds auto plus hide in cell A1.
We should
Hey.
hit on one.
What's that?
We should hit on one.
Yeah. So if we look at options and report, they're both there. This is really kind of one of those things that drives JET. Okay? When we build our reports, you can consider row 1 and column A the VIP section. We put that behind a velvet rope. Don't go in there. The only thing we can put in there are specific Jet keywords. And we'll talk about the keywords as we go through our training. Most of the time, you're probably going to use maybe 6 of the 11 that exist. There's not a whole lot of them, so it's not a whole lot you have to remember, and you're going to use the same ones over and over again. Okay? But the reason we say don't put anything in row 1 or column A, let's say I put in reports by me, in D1. There's one of 2 things that will happen. Jet's going to scroll along looking for Jet keywords. It's going to hit report by me. It's going to turn its little Jet brain and say, I don't know what that means. And it's going to move on, no harm, no foul. But it could decide to do this. Report by me, I don't know what that means. I'm going to turn it into my 3-year-old, fall on the ground, have a tantrum, and destroy your report. So, don't do it. Because it's one of those that it could be nothing, or it could break your report and you have to literally start from scratch. And the problem is when you start from scratch, you're going to get stuck in report mode, which means you'll never be able to get back into design mode to access all of those functions and those formulas. So you can't just copy and paste. You have to literally start from scratch. And I have people, well, I put stuff in there all the time. It doesn't do anything. It will work until it won't. And then you'll be very, very sad. So just consider row 1 in column A off limits unless it's one of the few keywords that you use. But the reason I create both of my tabs, I go into report, I go into design, this is what puts that auto plus hide for me, and I don't have to remember to do that. Just a little something. Saves me some extra typing and the possibility of forgetting that. So let's go to my option page. We are going to set this up, and all I'm going to do is we're going to jump up to Katie's marketing report. It's on page 236. We've got our mock-up, we've got our filters. We only had 2 filters, our posting date. No, we have 3. Posting date, item number, and entry type. Those are the ones we're going to use. So I'm going to start here about C3. You can start in B2 if you want, but I usually start with C3 because I have a web design background. I like having that little bit of a buffer. Right? When I go into design, it hides row 1 in column A, hence the hide. So I put it in C3. And I'm going to put in my filters. Posting date, item number, and entry type.
You have to be in design.
Yes, you want to make sure you're in design mode. Any changes you make while in your report mode, either it's not going to remember it, or oftentimes you're going to get some very strange results. Hopefully I don't lock anybody out. Okay. Alright. Now I need to treat these filters very similar to when I'm putting them into the JFX. I have to have a filter field along with some sort of value with it. So as I look at Katie's marketing report, she says I need a report that shows me all customers who we have sold a bicycle to within the last 12 months along with their et cetera, et cetera. Well, we're going to make the posting data report filter or allow her to change that. Because to me, I can interpret the past 12 months of literally 12 months from today, 12 months from the end of last month, 12 months meaning last year, 12 months meaning the last fiscal year, if it's different than our actual year. So you know what, Katie? I'm going to just put a star here. I'm going to let you figure that out on your own, and you can put your own date range in there. Our item number, well, I don't really have an item number yet. If I knew my bicycle number, I could put it in, item 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But again, I don't know what it is, so I'm just going to put a star. Same thing with that entry type. I don't know what she wants as those values, so I'm going to let her determine these.
Oh, sorry, just
Okay.
putting it up there.
That was like, that's very interesting.
Those are the codes for the bicycles.
Excellent. So I just need to input all these. And, okay. So I've got my options. So the next stage I'm going to do is I'm going to pull these over to my report page. So I'm just going to simply grab the titles. I'm not going to grab the asterisks.
So we shouldn't have done that to run the report on our report page?
We want to make sure these are options on our option page. So I'm just going to copy the titles. You're going to put them there anyway, so you kind of went ahead. I'm going to go back into my report on the report tab and paste it in there.
Same cells?
Same cells if you want, you can put them anywhere you want. But yeah, as we can see, we don't have these values. I want the asterisks to come on over, so I'm just going to use cell references equals the option page, grab that value. In fact, I can just copy that on down. So if I say item number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever it is, that'll actually copy over to my report page. The reason for that is when we build our report, we want to have the filters on that same page. We don't want to have to go across the sheet to get those values. It's an inefficient way of doing things. All right, so once we've got our options set up, I just go through and add my headers. So which one was Katie? Katie, since I can pull this up here. I'm just going to paste those in. So my headers were customer number, customer name, contact, phone, address, and quantity purchased.